This is study number 17 from Fernando Sor's Op.60, and follow the lesson for free and pick up all the tips, but if you're interested, I do have an edition of all 25 studies from Sor's Op.60, so there's a link for that in the description. Op.60 is a range of levels starting kind of, at the early intermediate, and then progressing to the later intermediate, and maybe one or two at the early advanced level, but mostly solidly in the grade 4 to 5 level. I would put that the majority of the pieces at that level, and this one included. But there's a big range there. Like this particular study is very interesting. It's not difficult. It all sits in the first position of the guitar. There's no particularly awkward fingerings or anything like that. But there's a certain amount of complexity because all the little figurations change quite a bit in this piece, making it a tricky one to sight read accurately, for example. Especially in the latter half of the piece. I would love to go faster, but really, there's just so many little changes that he does, and it's pretty tough to read through it. So if you work on it a lot and really get to know it well, you could bring the tempo up to a very high level. But if you're kind of reading it, it can be very tricky. There's just lots of little changes in what strings he uses in the accompaniment and things like that. But we'll talk about that more in just a moment. I think the first thing that will really cross people's minds on this piece is what right-hand fingering to use. And the first thing I'll say about that is that the way Sor wrote the piece in terms of the voicing, like stems going up or down, is not always very consistent. And for that reason, that kind of messes me up, because when voicing is consistent, I'll say I'll play the bass voice with my thumb and the accompaniment with my fingers. But sometimes in pieces like this, Sor's not very consistent with the voicing and then becomes a little confusing. So what I would recommend to most students, and what I would do with the piece, is to completely simplify it by playing pretty much every second note or every eighth note in the piece with your thumb, with the exception of the end of bar 3 and bar 4. So I'm using my thumb on all the bass voice. Even here, just to simplify it, to keep the fingering really simple. There's a couple of places later on, like bar 14, where he doesn't voice it, he doesn't make that A in bar 14 as a downstem. So you might be tempted to go P-A-I-M, for example. But the thing is, you've been using your thumb the whole time, and most of the textures, you use your thumb, throughout as a inner voice, or at least a bass voice. So it's really up to you, but I think I would simplify it by playing all of the on the beat eighth notes with your thumb. Even this, and then not this bar, of course. In bar 9, continue using the thumb on the lower voice. So even on those accompaniment, you could go P-A-I-M, P-A-I-M, but I would just keep using your thumb. It just simplifies it. Instead of switching your fingerings every bar and getting confused or mixed up, just use your thumb the whole time. And there's a little bit of jumping around of the thumb, but that's okay. Really keeps the fingering just super simple. When I first started playing the piece, I used my fingers more, but as I got faster, just use the thumb. And then I try to alternate the upper fingers, not always, depending on how big the stretch is. If the stretch is large, I'll repeat the A finger after each thumb note. But for the most part, I'm trying to alternate the fingers even across beats. So let's just do a walkthrough, and I'll just point out a couple of other little things, but that's mainly it. So to get around jumping fingers at the beginning, I use 4, 2, 1. That way 3 can go back. I follow the voicing of Sor there, so fingers on the upper voice, thumb, finger, continue. So you can see I use my fourth finger on the F slots just because of the transitions. You know, you're holding your third finger down, and then you use your fourth finger there because you're sustaining the C. And you just kind of keep using it. Bar 9. So I continue using my thumb even on the inner voice, if you want to call it an inner voice. And you can see, like at bar 12, he doesn't put down stems on the inner notes though, even though previously in bar 10 he did. So it's a little bit inconsistent in the voicing. But I've left it just because so you can see what Sor wrote. And you can reimagine it however you want. You can follow my advice or use some flexibility there. So bar 13. Bar 17. Very careful in this section that you're looking at what the upper note is doing. The upper note is changing a lot and it's not always very consistent. So be very careful that you practice this slowly and carefully because it's really easy to misplay a string, one of the strings. The thing is, it will sound just fine if you kind of like are holding a chord and play the wrong string. That's the funny thing about recording it is that I want it to be accurate, but like if I was sight reading it, I could totally fake it and it would sound perfectly fine because the harmonies would be the same. But, you know, like it is useful to be accurate sometimes. Well, you should try to play it accurately. Bar 21, you can switch the first finger over if you like. A better solution might be to do a kind of like a pivot bar or a hinge bar. I didn't include it in the edition because I don't think most people would use it there. You know, that's when you do a bar A with your first finger, but you're only getting the fourth string and the third string. It's kind of a weird technique. Some people really don't like it. I tend to shy away from it. But it is useful in this case to sustain all of those notes. But I'll leave that up to you. You can just hop your finger over. It won't make a huge gap. And that's it. So yeah, like throughout the whole piece, I'm pretty much using my thumb on all those eighth note beats. Really simplifies the fingering and allows you just to go through the piece. And if you want, you can think of it as a study in, you know, the thumb accuracy on different strings. That can be very useful in this particular study. It's a little bit of a finicky one, but it does turn out to be fairly nice. Play around with the tempo. I think this piece could be played a little bit faster than I did it, but it depends how long you want to work on it. And, it can sound nice at slower speeds too. So experiment with your tempo, but it just takes a little bit of getting to know the piece. It's not difficult, but you have to get to know it.